Boxing Truth here. Playing matchmaker over here. And I got a feeling I know what direction Andre Berto is going to take. Now that it's been reported that he's going to be going another direction in terms of the mandatory openings that need to be fulfilled for Danny Garcia's next mandatory opponent. The WBC announced a so-called tournament where challengers from within the rankings of the WBC in both the welterweight and super welterweight divisions, they will have like a sort of tournament to determine who will be the next mandatory contenders to challenge Danny Garcia, who's the champion at welterweight. And right now the WBC title at super welterweight is still vacant. However, there's been hardly any movement when it comes to that tournament. Now it's been reported that the WBC ordered Lamont Peterson versus Andre Berto in one of the slots to be filled in order to help determine a mandatory contender for Danny Garcia. But Andre Berto is going into a different direction. And I'm just thinking where that direction will be. And I got a feeling it's going to be Danny Garcia. Yes, I know, I hear the groans. I could see Danny Garcia getting trashed for fighting Andre Berto like he usually does. So more cherries will be posted on his Instagram, taking on Mayweather leftovers. I don't know. That's my opinion. Maybe some people would like the fight. Maybe some people are dumb enough to think Andre Berto would beat Danny Garcia, because he won't. That's not going to happen. And it's because Berto's a faded fighter. He's seen better days. He's a very beatable fighter right now. Defense sucks. It's chinny. He fights in spurts. He can get beat by anybody right now. It's how bad it is for Andre Berto. And if I'm Andre Berto, I really can't blame him for wanting to go into another direction, because think about it. You know, Andre Berto, he's coming off the loss to Mayweather, where he had a bad performance. He wasn't pulling the trigger. But that's nothing new. He wasn't pulling the trigger before that fight as well. In the fight against Josesito Lopez, he was getting beat until he scored a couple of knockdowns and got a political stoppage. I mean, that fight was stopped too quick. They should have given Josesito a chance to recover, but he didn't get that chance. Of course, people will wonder why, but got a feeling that they already knew Berto was going to be the next opponent for Mayweather, so they stopped that fight as fast as they could, because he was getting beat in that fight by Josesito Lopez. But you look at the rankings in the welterweight, and I can play matchmaker right now. I know who Andre Berto can and cannot beat. And there's a lot of fighters that will beat him right now. So you might as well, if you're managing Andre Berto, you might as well cash him out right now, because it's the end of the road for him. So why not go after a Danny Garcia fight for the strap right away instead of fighting Lamont Peterson? I favor Lamont Peterson. There's a bunch of guys that can beat Andre Berto. Chris Algieri beats him. Saddam Ali beats him. Dmitry Mayalenko beats him. Errol Spence beats him. Jesse Vargas beats him. Sammy Vasquez beats him. I favor Lamont to beat him, even though he looked like shit his last fight. Sean Porter beats him. Kell Brook trashes him. Timothy Bradley trashes him. Keith Thurman trashes him. Manny Pacquiao trashes him. So you might as well go after the biggest prize. And also Sammy Vasquez beats him as well. You might as well go after the prize, the biggest prize you can get, and that's a Danny Garcia fight for the shot at his strap, because he's very beatable right now. He's very hittable. He hasn't looked good in a lot of his fights, and I'm just thinking it's very possible that Danny Garcia and Andre Berto could be next. I could be wrong. Don't take my word for it. But I just see it as a possibility. There's rumblings Mayweather wants to return. He sees as Danny Garcia as being his potential 50th fight. So it makes sense. Why not Danny Garcia fight one of his leftovers? But Andre Berto is still a named fighter. He's still a named fighter that boxing fans know. But it'll be another showcase for Danny Garcia. And Danny Garcia, his run at welterweight, it's been carefully manufactured. He hasn't fought the best available competition. He's mostly been fighting faded guys like Paulie Malignaggi and Robert Guerrero, and now he's gonna fight, perhaps, I don't know, that's nothing official, but perhaps Andre Berto could be next. And that's another showcase fight where Danny's gonna perhaps score his first legit knockout at welterweight, because Andre Berto's a very hittable fighter. Danny did record a stoppage against Malignaggi, but it was a mercy stoppage. I think Danny could perhaps get his first legitimate knockout at welterweight in his first defense of his WBC strap. I know it sounds like I'm trashing Andre Berto. Andre Berto, he was a better amateur as a pro. He had a lot of accolades, national champion, made the Olympics, had some great fights in the amateurs. But as a pro, it hasn't panned out. He was with Heyman from the jump, I believe. Heyman manufactured his rise to the top, but he wasn't fighting the best opponents. He was fighting obscure opposition, very carefully selected opponents. And this is around the time when HBO was Heymanizing. They were buying a lot of mismatches featuring Andre Berto. He was fighting faded guys like Hasima Rivera, a decent fighter in David Estrada, but coming off a couple of losses going into the fight. Fought a German. I think HBO bought that fight, showcased it, and then he won a vacant title, the WBC title, in June of 2008. And I bet you a bunch of y'all don't even remember the dude's name, because I don't even remember. I have to look it up my damn self. His name was Miguel Angel Rodriguez, who fought a bunch of nobodies before that fight. Was able to get a vacant title shot against Berto. HBO bought this trash, and Berto knocked him out. Then he kept fighting safe opponents, undersized guys like Stevie Forbes. He finally fought a real welterweight, a legit, real pro, and Luis Collazo. A lot of people thought he lost that fight. He continued to cherry pick after that. Made Juan Urango move up in weight to fight him. Urango was a career 140-pounder, one-dimensional fighter. He's probably best remembered by getting knocked out by Devin Alexander. Made Alexander look like a monster that night. But we all know how that ended up. Knocked out Quintana, but Quintana had already been knocked out twice before that fight. And was able to get another showcase fight against Freddie Hernandez. Knocked him out. Got a $900,000 payday somehow. Heyman hooked him up. And then he loses to Victor Ortiz. And that just shows you how exposed Berto got exposed in that fight. I mean, you lost to Victor Ortiz. Ortiz, the heartless Victor Ortiz, one of the bigger disappointments in boxing. Had potential, but quit in all of his fights. But somehow had the eye of the tiger against Berto. It's very ironic. He got knocked down in that fight, and he didn't do. He usually quits after the going's too tough. He's done it so many of his fights, but against Andre Berto, he bit down on his mouthpiece, got up, and kicked Andre Berto's ass, and somehow became a world champion. But he got it done that night. But it was two guys that had a lot of flaws, had a lot of very flawed fighters fighting each other. Two guys that had been exposed, and they were fighting each other for a world title. Then he fights paper champion John Zavik, wins another world title, gets beat up by Guerrero, gets knocked out by Soto Karass. Embarrassing loss. looks like shit against Chambers, was just a workmanlike decision, was getting beat by Josesito Lopez before he got the stoppage. And then got the big money fight with Floyd, his biggest payday, and didn't do shit in the fight. Landed a couple of shots, but another boring Mayweather unanimous decision performance. And that's been Andre Berto's career. But Andre Berto, he's been one of the fighters that has benefited being with Al Haymon. He didn't have a great career, but he made a lot. He had a great career financially. He made some money. Al Haymon really got him some good paydays. Was able to get him on the network. Was able to guide him to a couple of world titles. Of course, the opposition was manufactured, was carefully selected, and he was more flash than the real deal. He has some talent, he has some power, he has some speed, but he didn't have the conditioning, he didn't have the chin, and he just didn't. He's just not a great fighter. He wasn't good enough to be at that elite level. And it showed in every one of his major fights. He just didn't deliver. Victor Ortiz beat him up. Robert Guerrero beat the shit out of him. A guy who has really had no success at welterweight. He got beat up by a featherweight. A guy who moved up a bunch of divisions and got destroyed out. He actually got out-strengthened by this guy somehow. And gets knocked out by a journeyman, tough guy, Soto Karass. But, I see it very possible that he could be fighting Danny Garcia next. Andre Berto, he knows that his time's running out. That it's a long road to get back to the top. So he might as well get the biggest fight out there he can get, and he's expressed interest in fighting Danny Garcia. He'd be interested in that fight, and if I'm managing him, I'd pull the trigger on that fight because there's a bunch of guys that could beat him. Why match him with other guys that could possibly beat him? Might as well cash him out with Danny Garcia. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.